Hey guys. Tonight we are traveling to a city of music, dreams, and quiet corners. We're drifting back to 19th century Vienna, a city where the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones provides a constant rhythm, and the air is thick with the scent of coal smoke, roasting chestnuts, and distant, beautiful music. We're going to settle into a small, quiet alley, into the lives of a family about to receive a most unexpected inheritance, one that will change their lives forever. Are you ready in your warm bed? I truly hope so. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always so wonderful to see where everyone is listening from, so feel free to share your city or country and the local time in the comments below. It feels like we're all sharing this quiet moment together from all corners of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a young woman named Lena, and the world outside your window is Vienna. Not the grand imperial Vienna of towering opera houses and sprawling palaces you might imagine, but the Vienna of the Biedermeier period. It's a time of quiet domesticity, a time when, after years of turmoil and war, people have turned inward. They find their joy not in grand public gestures, but in the warmth of their own homes, in music played in the parlor, in poetry read by candlelight, and in the simple, sturdy comfort of a well-made chair. It's an era that cherishes the small, the personal, and the cozy. And your life is very much a part of this world. You live with your parents, Franz and Liesel Keller, in a small but tidy apartment on the third floor of a tall, sober-looking building. Your apartment overlooks a quiet courtyard where, in the mornings, you can hear the rhythmic thwack-thwack of a neighbor beating a carpet. Your father, Papa Franz, is a clerk for a shipping merchant. He is a man of gentle habits and quiet anxieties, a man whose life is ruled by the neat columns of numbers in his ledger books. He leaves every morning at the same time, his worn leather satchel tucked under his arm, and returns every evening at the same time, his shoulders slightly more slumped than when he left. Your mother, Mama Liesel, is the warm heart of your small home. Her domain is the kitchen, a space no bigger than a closet, but from which the most wonderful smells seem to constantly emerge, the scent of simmering soup, of baking bread, and on special occasions, the rich almond-scented magic of a Gugelhupf cake. She moves with a quiet efficiency, her hands always busy, her face often creased with a small, worried frown that only you seem to notice. Lately, that frown has been a little deeper, a little more permanent. You've overheard whispers between your parents, hushed conversations after you've gone to bed, about rising costs, about the merchant's business being slow. The quiet comfort of your Biedermeier life feels a little more fragile than it used to. One gray Tuesday afternoon, it arrives, a letter. Not a personal note from a friend, but a formal-looking envelope, sealed with a blob of imposing dark red wax. It is delivered by a stern-looking man who seems impatient to be done with his task. The letter is addressed to your father. He reads it standing in the middle of your small parlor, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He reads it once, then twice, a look of complete bewilderment on his face. What is it, Franz? Your mother asks, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. It's from a solicitor, he says, his voice a little shaky. It seems my great-uncle Albrecht has passed away. You've never met great-uncle Albrecht. He was a distant, almost mythical figure, your grandfather's estranged brother, a man who, according to family lore, was a bit of a recluse and a miser. The letter goes on to say that Albrecht has left your father, his closest living relative, his sole worldly possession. It is not a sum of money, as a flicker of desperate hope might suggest. It is a property. The letter lists an address, an obscure street name in a part of the city you've never heard of, and includes a single, large, rust-pitted iron key. A property, Mama Liesel says, her voice a mix of hope and skepticism. What kind of property? A house? It doesn't say, Papa Franz replies, staring at the key in his palm as if it were a strange insect. It just says, property. The next day, a Saturday, your father takes the day off from his ledgers. The three of you set out on a quest. The address from the letter leads you away from the familiar, respectable streets of your neighborhood into a labyrinth of older, narrower lanes. Historians still argue whether these narrow side streets were a deliberate feature of city planning, designed to create shade and shelter, or simply the result of centuries of organic, unplanned growth as the city grew denser within its old walls. To you, it just feels like you're stepping back in time. The buildings lean closer together, their upper floors almost touching, blocking out the sky. The air is still and smells of damp stone and coal smoke. Finally, after asking for directions from a baker's boy whose apron is dusted with the specific fine white flour of a Kipfler Bäcker, a specialist croissant baker, you find the street. It's less a street and more a forgotten cobblestone alley, barely wide enough for a cart to pass through. It's squeezed between the back of a tall, grimy tenement building and a shuttered textile warehouse. There is no number on any door. This can't be right, your father mutters, looking at the solicitor's letter again, but you spot it. Tucked away in the darkest part of the alley is a low, unremarkable wooden door set directly into the brick wall of the warehouse. It has no window, no handle, only a large rusty keyhole. It is so covered in grime and neglect that it seems to have melted into the wall itself. Your father approaches it with a sense of trepidation. He takes the heavy iron key from his pocket. For a moment, he just looks at it, then at the door, as if he expects it to all vanish like a dream. He slides the key into the lock. It resists, grinding with the protest of years of disuse. He puts his shoulder into it, turning with all his might. There is a loud, groaning crack as the lock's inner mechanism finally gives way. He pulls the door open. It swings inward on shrieking, rusty hinges, revealing not a room, but a wall of solid blackness. A wave of air washes over you, cool and musty, carrying the scent of 100 years of dust, of dry rot, of time itself, trapped and decaying. Your father lights a small lantern he had the foresight to bring. He holds it up and steps across the threshold, with you and your mother following close behind, your hands clutching each other's. The lantern's flickering flame pushes back the darkness, and you see what it is that you have inherited. It is not a house, it is not an apartment, it is a storeroom, and it is tiny. It is a long, narrow rectangle of a space, perhaps no wider than your father is tall, and only a few paces deep. The ceiling is low, crisscrossed with thick, dark beams, from which hang cobwebs as thick as cotton batting. The floor is made of uneven stone slabs, slick with a fine layer of damp grime. The brick walls are bare, stained with dark patches of moisture. The space is completely empty, save for a single broken wooden crate in the corner and a thick carpet of dust that covers everything, swallowing the lantern light and muffling your footsteps. You all stand there in a tight, silent cluster, the small flame of the lantern casting your long, distorted shadows against the grimy walls. The silence is profound. The bustling sounds of Vienna don't penetrate this deep into the alley. All you can hear is the faint hiss of the lantern and your own quiet breathing. This is it. This is your great inheritance. Not a fortune, not a home, but a forgotten hole in a wall, a cramped, dark, useless space in a forgotten corner of the city. You can see the hope draining from your father's face, replaced by a weary, familiar disappointment. He had allowed himself a small, secret dream on the journey here, a dream of a windfall that might ease the worry lines on his wife's face. And this is the reality. Well, he says, his voice hollow, trying to muster a cheerfulness that sounds painfully false. It's sturdy. Your mother, ever the practical one, runs a hand along the brick wall, her fingers coming away, black with soot. She looks at the damp floor, at the low, oppressive ceiling. "What on earth would anyone do with a place like this?" she whispers, more to herself than to anyone else. And that is the question that hangs in the cold, dusty air. What could anyone possibly do with this dark, narrow, forgotten room? It seems like a cruel joke, a miser's final posthumous laugh. You stand there, a small family huddled in the weak, flickering light of a single lantern, surrounded by the smell of dust and disappointment. You have inherited a space that seems to be the physical embodiment of a dead end. It is nothing, just a cold, empty box. But sometimes an empty box is also an opportunity. It is a blank page waiting for a new story to be written upon it. And though you don't know it yet, standing in the gloom, a new story is about to begin. The walk home from the alleyway is a quiet, heavy affair. The city of Vienna, usually a symphony of sound and life to you, feels muted and gray. Your father, Papa Franz, walks with his gaze fixed on the cobblestones, the now useless iron key weighing down his coat pocket. The brief, flickering flame of hope that the solicitor's letter had ignited has been thoroughly extinguished by the cold, damp reality of the storeroom. You and your mother walk on either side of him, a silent guard of shared disappointment. There is nothing to say. The inheritance was not a lifeline. It was a joke, a final, cynical punchline from a man none of you had ever known. That evening, the mood in your small apartment is thick with unspoken gloom. Your mother prepares a simple dinner of potatoes and sausage, and the three of you eat in near silence. Your father pushes the food around his plate, his appetite gone. After dinner, he sits in his usual armchair, but instead of reading the newspaper, he just stares at the patterns on the worn rug, his mind clearly miles away, lost in a labyrinth of worry. Later that night, you are woken from a light sleep by a sound from the parlor. It's the soft, rhythmic creak of a floorboard. the sound of your father pacing back and forth, a caged animal in your small apartment. You know he is not just pacing to stretch his legs. He is wrestling with the numbers that govern your lives, the relentless arithmetic of income versus expenses. He is a man trapped in a column of figures that no longer add up, and the weight of it is crushing him. You pull your blanket tighter, your heart aching for him, for the quiet desperation you can feel through the thin walls of your home. The next morning, your father seems different. There is a strange restless energy about him. He leaves for work at his usual time, but when he returns in the evening, the slump in his shoulders is gone. In its place is a look you have never seen on him before, a mixture of terror and fierce, feverish excitement. He doesn't sit down. He waits until your mother has cleared the dinner plates, and then he speaks, his voice low and urgent. Liesel, Lena, I have an idea. He asks you both to sit at the table. He remains standing, pacing the small space between the table and the window, just as he had the night before. But this is not the pacing of a trapped man. This is the pacing of a man about to leap. I was walking through the city today during my lunch hour, he begins, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. I passed by the Café Greenstidel. It was full, of course. Every table was taken. Men in fine coats, reading newspapers from all over Europe, smoking, talking for hours. A cup of coffee and a piece of cake costs more than your mother spends on our dinner. He stops and looks at you both. The coffee houses are the living rooms of Vienna. Social historians debate the primary driver of this coffee house boom, whether it's a need for political discussion in a time of censorship, or simply a warm place to escape a cold apartment. But whatever the reason, they are essential. They are where life happens. Your mother nods slowly, unsure where this is leading. They are for rich men, Franz, for artists and intellectuals. That is not our world. Exactly, he says, his voice rising with passion. That is my point. They are grand, they are expensive, they are intimidating. But what if there was another kind, a different sort of place? He takes a deep breath, and then he says the words that will change everything. We will open our own coffee house. Silence. Your mother stares at him as if he has just announced he is going to learn to fly. You look from his wild, shining eyes to her stunned face. In where, Franz? She finally asks, her voice flat. In the middle of our parlor? No, he says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. In the storeroom, in our inheritance. Your mother lets out a sound that is halfway between a laugh and a gasp. Franz, have you lost your mind? It's a dungeon. It's tiny, it's damp, it's in an alley where no person ever walks. It is a disaster. It is small, he concedes, leaning forward, his hands now flat on the table, his eyes pleading with her to see his vision. But that is its strength. We won't be a grand cafe. We will be the smallest coffee house in all of Vienna. We won't have marble tables and velvet chairs. We will have 2 or 3 little wooden stools. We won't have an orchestra. We will have quiet, a refuge from the noise, a place for a working man to have a good, strong, hot cup of coffee without paying a week's wages. And who will make this coffee? She challenges, crossing her arms. You need a license to be a café cider, a coffee brewer. It is a concession granted by the emperor himself. They don't just hand them out to clerks who have a mad dream. The guilds would have us shut down in a day. This was true. The business of serving food and drink in Vienna was a thicket of ancient rules and protected trades. To open a coffee house without the proper license wasn't just ambitious. It was illegal. It was a direct challenge to the established order. "We won't call it a coffee house," he argues, his voice low and quick. "We won't have a sign. We will be a secret, a place people find by word of mouth. I will brew the coffee myself. And you, Liesel." He looks at her, his expression softening. "Your cakes, your simple, perfect Gugelhupf. Imagine a cup of my coffee and a slice of your cake. Who in Vienna could offer such a thing?" You watch your mother. You can see the war in her eyes. Every practical, sensible bone in her body is screaming that this is madness. It's a fantasy, a hopeless, foolish dream, built on a foundation of damp bricks and dust. But then she looks at your father. She sees the desperation, yes, but she also sees that spark she hasn't seen since they were young. The spark of a man who wants to build something, not just count another man's goods. She sees a man who is not just running from poverty, but running towards a dream. "And the money, Franz?" she asks, her voice softer now. "It would take money to make that place. Habitable money for a stove, for wood, for cups, for the coffee beans themselves. We have no money. This is the final, insurmountable wall." Your father looks down at his hands on the table. He takes another deep breath. "We do," he says softly. "We have the savings. The money your mother left us for a true emergency." He is talking about the small nest egg they have kept hidden away for years, a few precious coins saved for a doctor's bill, or a harsh winter, or the dowry for your own future marriage. It is your family's only safety net. "You would risk all of it," your mother whispers, her voice full of disbelief. "On a damp little room in a forgotten alley?" "It is a wager," he admits, his eyes meeting hers. He is not trying to hide the enormity of the risk. "It is a terrible, frightening wager. But I look at my life, at the ledgers, at the endless columns of numbers, and I see our future. It is a slow, steady decline. This is a chance, our only chance, I think, to make something for ourselves, for Lena." He looks at you, and in his eyes you see his motivation. This isn't for him, it's for you, for the hope of a future better than his own. The three of you sit in a profound, heavy silence. The fate of your family hangs in the air, suspended in this single moment of decision. Your mother looks at your father's face, etched with worry and a terrifying hope. She looks at her own hands, calloused from years of work. She looks at you. You remember the deep, permanent frown lines you've been noticing on her face. In this moment, you see them smooth out, replaced by a look of steely resolve. She reaches across the table and places her hand over your father's. "All right, Franz," she says, her voice quiet but firm, a general agreeing to a desperate battle plan. "All right. We make our wager." A wave of relief so powerful it seems to make him shudder passes through your father. He sinks into a chair, his face in his hands, not in despair, but in gratitude. The decision is made. The leap will be taken. You are no longer just the Keller family. residents of a third-floor apartment. You are now conspirators, partners in a wild, improbable, and utterly terrifying scheme. You have wagered every last thing you have on the dream of turning the city's most useless room into its smallest, most beloved coffee house. The decision, made in the quiet of your lamplit parlor, feels terrifyingly real the next morning. The wager has been placed. Now the work must begin. The three of you return to the forgotten alley, but this time you are not a delegation of the disappointed. You are an army of three, armed with brooms, buckets, rags, and a shared fragile sense of purpose. Standing before the grimy wooden door, your father, Papa Franz, doesn't hesitate. He turns the heavy iron key with a resolute click, and you step back into the space that holds your family's future. The first task is a battle against time itself, a battle against decades of dust and neglect. Your mother, Mama Liesel, ties a scarf around her hair, rolls up her sleeves, and begins to sweep. The dust rises in thick gray clouds, so dense it makes you cough. It's the dust of forgotten years, of seasons turning unheard, of a Vienna that no longer exists. You join her, your brooms working in a rhythmic swoosh, swoosh against the grimy stone floor. Your father tackles the cobwebs, great, thick, Gothic creations that cling to the ceiling beams with a stubborn tenacity. It is hard, dirty, thankless work, but with every patch of floor revealed, with every beam cleared, a little more light seems to find its way into the gloom. You are not just cleaning a room, you are reclaiming it from oblivion. When the sweeping is done, the scrubbing begins. On your hands and knees, you and your mother scrub the stone flagstones with coarse brushes and harsh lye soap. The water in your buckets turns black almost instantly. You scrub until your knuckles are raw and your back aches. But slowly, miraculously, the true color of the stone begins to emerge. A cool, dappled gray, like the belly of a fish. The room starts to smell less of decay and more of clean, wet stone and soap. As the cleaning progresses, your family's roles in this venture naturally emerge. Your father becomes the builder. He takes the family's meager savings, the coins that feel impossibly heavy with the weight of the wager, and he goes on a series of expeditions. To bring this tiny space to life, he can't simply go to one large shop. He must navigate the city's complex web of specialized craftsmen, a living map of 19th century trade. He visits a lumber merchant in a district smelling richly of pine sap and sawdust to buy a few precious planks of wood. He haggles with a blacksmith whose workshop rings with the clang of hammer on anvil, for a handful of sturdy nails and simple iron brackets for shelves. He commissions a glazier to cut a single, small pane of glass, just large enough to fit into the top half of the door, a tiny window to the world that will let in a sliver of precious light. Back in the storeroom, he works with a quiet, focused intensity. You've never seen in him. He is no longer a clerk, hunched over a ledger. He is a creator. You watch, fascinated, as he measures and saws, the scent of fresh-cut wood mingling with the damp air. From the salvaged planks, he builds a simple, narrow counter to run along one wall. He builds 3 small, sturdy, 3-legged stools, their design born of necessity and the limited amount of wood he could afford. He sands every surface by hand until it is smooth and free of splinters. He even takes the wood from the single broken crate you found on your first visit, salvaging every usable piece to build a low, wide step for the entrance, a small, welcoming gesture. Your role becomes that of the finisher. While your father builds, you are tasked with the walls. The dark, stained brick makes the room feel like a tomb. You all agree it must be painted. Your father buys a large sack of lime and pigment, and you mix it with water in a bucket, stirring it with a stick until it becomes a thick, creamy, off-white paint. Architectural historians debate the Biedermeier era's influence on interior design. Whether its famous emphasis on light, simplicity, and uncluttered spaces was a conscious aesthetic choice, or simply a practical response to the small, dark apartments many people lived in. For you, there is no debate. You need light. You dip your brush into the bucket and apply the first stroke to the wall. The transformation is immediate and magical. The creamy white covers the dark, grimy brick like a blanket of fresh snow. Painting is a slow, methodical process. You work your way around the room, brushstroke by careful brushstroke, the rhythmic motion almost meditative. The room gets brighter with every foot of wall you cover, the oppressive feeling lifting, replaced by a sense of clean, airy possibility. While you and your father toil in the alley, your mother begins the most vital work of all, back in the small kitchen of your apartment. She is the heart of the culinary operation. She knows you cannot compete with the grand cafes and their dozens of elaborate torte and pastries. You need one thing, one perfect thing. She decides it will be her Gugelhupf, the simple, fluted bundt cake, a staple of every Austrian home. But it will be the most perfect Gugelhupf in all of Vienna. Day after day, she experiments, adjusting her recipe by a pinch of this, a dash of that. You would come home from your work in the alley, tired and splattered with paint, to the soul-lifting aroma of almond, lemon zest, and caramelized sugar. At the same time, your father begins his own alchemical experiments with the heart of the enterprise, the coffee. He brings home a sack of raw coffee beans. They are small, gnarled, and pale green, smelling faintly of grass and earth. They have traveled a vast distance to reach Vienna, likely from the far-off mountains of Yemen or Ethiopia, through the sprawling Ottoman Empire to the port of Trieste, and then overland by horse and cart. He knows that buying pre-roasted beans is too expensive, the quality too unreliable. He must learn to do it himself. He uses a long-handled iron pan held over the small coal stove in your kitchen. His first attempts are disastrous. He burns the beans to a black, oily crisp, filling the apartment with a thick, acrid smoke that makes your eyes water. The next batch he under-roasts, leaving them tasting sour and grassy. But he persists. Night after night he stands over the stove, shaking the pan with a steady, rhythmic motion, listening for the crucial first crack, a sound like popping corn that signals the beans are beginning to cook. He learns to judge by smell, by color, by instinct. Slowly, he gets it right. The kitchen begins to fill, not with smoke, but with a new glorious aroma, a rich, deep, chocolatey, nutty scent that is the very soul of good coffee. He has mastered the roast. The alley itself begins to transform. The initial smell of dust and damp gives way to the clean, sharp scents of sawdust and lime wash paint. And then, in the final week, as you install the small stove your father bought and begin to heat the space, a new kind of magic happens. Your mother brings her first official cake, fresh from the oven, and sets it on the new counter. Your father grinds a batch of his freshly roasted beans and brews the first pot of coffee on the stove. The glorious, soul-warming scent of strong, hot coffee and warm almond-scented cake drifts out of the small, newly windowed door and into the forgotten alley. It is a scent of pure comfort, of warmth, of welcome. It mingles with the lingering smell of fresh paint and new wood. It is the smell of your family's hope. The work is finally done. The three of you stand together in the transformed space. It is still tiny, still narrow, but it is no longer a dungeon. With its clean white walls, its simple, smooth wooden counter, and its three sturdy little stools, it looks cozy. It looks intentional. The single pane of glass in the door lets in a soft, dusty shaft of afternoon light, illuminating the single, perfect Gugelhupf that sits under a glass dome on the counter. A stack of 3 simple white cups, bought from a second-hand market, are nested by the small stove. The air is warm and smells impossibly, wonderfully delicious. You have turned a forgotten hole in the wall into a tiny haven. You are exhausted, your hands are rough, your muscles ache, but you are filled with a sense of immense, quiet pride. All the work is done, all the savings are spent. Now, all you need is a customer. The first morning is a symphony of quiet terror and fragrant hope. The three of you stand in your tiny creation, your new roles, feeling like ill-fitting costumes. Your father, Papa Franz, stands behind the narrow wooden counter, his hands nervously wiping its smooth, clean surface with a cloth. Your mother, Mama Liesel, has brought 2 fresh Gugelhupf cakes from home, their golden fluted shapes sitting under glass domes like crowned jewels. And you, Lena, are the designated server, a clean white apron tied around your waist, your heart hammering against your ribs with a nervous rhythm. Your father props the door open with a small wooden wedge. The scent of his carefully roasted coffee and your mother's almond cake drifts out into the alley, a fragrant, hopeful invitation, and then you wait. You wait as the morning sun climbs higher, casting a long, dusty rectangle of light onto the stone floor. You hear the distant sounds of Vienna waking up, the rumble of delivery carts, the calls of street vendors, the faint, far-off melody of a practicing violinist. But the alley remains silent, a bubble of quiet in a bustling city. No one turns down your forgotten lane. No one even seems to glance in your direction. The coffee in the pot stays hot. The cakes remain whole. The 3 stools remain empty. With each passing hour, the bright flame of hope you all nurtured begins to flicker and dim. The confident pronouncements your father made in the parlor now seem like the ramblings of a madman. A hidden location, a secret refuge. It seems now that the secret is so well kept, you are the only 3 people in the world who know it exists. Your father's face grows pale, the familiar lines of anxiety returning to crease his brow. Your mother's hands, usually so busy, are clasped tightly in her lap as she sits on one of the stools, her gaze fixed on the empty doorway. You can feel the weight of your family's wager settling upon you all, as heavy and cold as the stone floor beneath your feet. The midday bells of a nearby church chime, their sound mocking your empty room. You eat a small lunch of bread and cheese, the silence between you thick with unspoken fear. You are about to suggest that perhaps you should close for the day, that this was all a terrible mistake, when a shadow falls across the open doorway. All three of you freeze. You look up to see a man standing there, silhouetted against the alley's light. He is tall and gaunt, dressed in a severe black coat that has seen better days, but is impeccably brushed. He is older, with a shock of untamed white hair that seems to have a life of its own. He wears small, round spectacles, perched on a formidable nose, and his mouth is set in a deep, permanent frown. He is clutching a thick, leather-bound book to his chest, as if it were a shield. He does not look like a man in search of cozy comfort. He looks like a hawk searching for a place to roost, and he is peering into your small establishment with an expression of profound suspicion. He takes a hesitant step inside, his sharp eyes darting around, taking in every detail. He sees the 3 new stools, the small counter, the 2 cakes, the clean white walls. He seems to be cataloging everything, and his frown deepens, as if the sheer simplicity and smallness of the place is an personal affront to him. Your father, snapping out of his stupor, steps forward. "Good day, sir," he says, his voice coming out as a nervous squeak. He clears his throat. "Welcome." The man's sharp eyes fix on your father. "This is a new establishment?" he asks, his voice a dry, gravelly rumble. "It is not a question so much as an accusation." "Yes, sir." "Our first day," your father replies, wringing the cleaning cloth in his hands. The man grunts, a small, non-committal sound. He looks at the cakes under their glass domes with disdain. "I require coffee," he announces. "Just coffee, black, and I require quiet." "Of course, sir. Right away," your father says, turning to the stove with a relieved sense of purpose. You watch as the man chooses the stool in the furthest, darkest corner of the room. He places his heavy book on the counter, sits down with the stiff reluctance of a man sitting on a bed of nails, and turns his back to you all, effectively creating a wall of stern disapproval around himself. Your father pours the coffee with a hand that trembles ever so slightly, the dark, fragrant liquid hissing into one of the simple white cups. As you watch, your mother gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod. You understand. You take a plate, carefully cut a slice of the still warm Gugelhupf, and place it beside the cup. You carry the plate and cup over to the man, your footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. "Your coffee, sir," you say softly, "and a slice of today's cake, with our compliments." He looks up from his book, his eyes peering at you over his spectacles. He glances at the slice of cake as if you have just presented him with a live toad. For a moment you think he is going to refuse it, to send it back. But after a long, tense pause, he gives a curt, barely perceptible nod of assent. You retreat back to your spot behind the counter, feeling as though you have just successfully fed a bear. And then the waiting begins again, but this is a new kind of waiting. A tense, awkward, and deeply quiet waiting. The professor. For you are sure he must be a professor from the nearby University of Vienna, with his book and his air of stern intellectualism. Opens his volume and begins to read. He takes a sip of his coffee. He ignores the cake. He does not move. The minutes stretch into an hour, then 2. He sits there, a silent, frowning statue, in the corner of your room, utterly absorbed in his book, This is the unwritten rule of the Viennese coffee house being put to the test: the right to linger, the right to turn a single cup of coffee into an afternoon's rent on a table. The three of you try to make yourselves invisible. You don't speak. You barely breathe. You can feel this man's presence filling the entire room. He is the sole audience for your family's desperate play, and his stony silence is a terrifying review. Biographers and scholars of the period often debate the true nature of Viennese Gemütlichkeit, that famous concept of coziness and warm affability. Is it a genuine, heartfelt warmth, or a more formal, reserved politeness, a carefully constructed performance of comfort? This man, you feel, is immune to any performance. He would only respond to the genuine article. Finally, after what feels like a lifetime, the professor takes a small, almost reluctant bite of the cake. He chews slowly, thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving the page of his book. He takes another sip of coffee. He takes another bite of cake. As the light in the alley begins to fade into the deep blue of dusk, he closes his book with a soft thump. The sound makes all three of you jump. He drains the last of his now cold coffee and stands up, stretching his long, stiff limbs. He pulls a few coins from his waistcoat pocket and places them deliberately on the counter. It is more than enough to cover the cost of the coffee. He turns to leave, and you all brace yourselves for his parting verdict. He walks to the door and pauses, his hand on the frame. He turns his head slightly, his gaze falling upon your father. "The coffee," the professor says, his voice as dry as dust, "is adequate." He pauses. "The cake is acceptable." Another pause, the longest yet. "The quiet," he concludes, "is excellent." And, with a final curt nod, he is gone. The shadow in the doorway vanishes, leaving the three of you standing in the quiet, coffee-scented twilight. You stare at the empty stool in the corner, then at the few precious copper coins gleaming on the counter. They are the first return on your family's wager. It is not much. It is almost nothing. But it is not nothing. It is something one grumpy, skeptical man found what he was looking for in your tiny room. You don't know his name or what was in his book, but his visit feels like a tiny, fragile victory. You have survived your first day, and you have your first customer. The few copper coins the professor left on the counter feel like a treasure. They are more than money. They are proof. Proof that one person in the vast city of Vienna found your tiny establishment, and that he did not immediately dismiss it. The next day, you open the door with a feeling not of desperate hope, but of quiet, anxious expectation. You don't know if he will return. His visit might have been a fluke, a one-time curiosity. For hours, the room remains empty, just as before. The familiar chill of disappointment begins to creep back in. But then, late in the afternoon, at the exact same time as the day before, his tall, dark silhouette once again fills the doorway. The grumpy professor has returned. He doesn't acknowledge you. He walks directly to his stool in the corner, places his book on the counter, and waits. Your father, his movements now a little more confident, prepares the coffee. You slice a piece of cake and place it beside the cup, just as you did before. The professor gives his same curt nod of acceptance and retreats into the world of his book. And so a silent ritual is born. He comes every day that week. He is your only customer. he never speaks beyond his initial, gruff order. He simply sits, reads, drinks his coffee, eats his cake, pays, and leaves. He has become your stamgast, your first and only regular. His silent, daily patronage is the single thread holding your family's dream together. He is the quiet anchor in your sea of uncertainty. Then, on a Tuesday in the following week, something changes. He does not arrive alone. Trailing a few steps behind him, looking deeply uncomfortable and intimidated, is a young man barely older than yourself. He has ink stains on his fingers and a look of intense, scholarly seriousness on his face. He is clearly one of the professor's students from the university. 2 coffees, the professor grumbles as he takes his usual stool. The student slides onto the stool beside him, looking around the tiny room with wide, curious eyes. Your father serves them, and you bring them each a slice of cake. The student's face breaks into a small, grateful smile when you place it in front of him. And then they begin to talk. Their voices are low, intense. You and your parents try not to listen, but in the small, quiet space, it's impossible not to overhear fragments of their conversation. They are not talking about the weather or city gossip. They are talking about the philosopher Immanuel Kant, about the nature of reason and perception. The professor challenges the student, pokes holes in his arguments, forces him to defend his ideas. The student, though nervous, holds his own, his voice growing in confidence as he becomes lost in the debate. You have never heard a conversation like it. It's a quiet, intellectual duel fought with ideas instead of swords. The student is the first ripple. The next day, he returns by himself for an hour in the morning. The day after that, the professor brings 2 more students, a young woman who sketches designs for buildings on a napkin, and a young man who reads German poetry aloud, in a soft, passionate whisper. Suddenly, all 3 of your stools are full. Your tiny, forgotten storeroom is crowded. Within a month, a remarkable, unplanned transformation has occurred. Your little establishment has become the professor's unofficial after-hours classroom, his private salon. The students learn that this is where they can find him, where they can engage with his formidable mind outside the formal constraints of a lecture hall. They start to come on their own, huddling together over a shared book, arguing in hushed, urgent tones. The atmosphere in the room changes. It is no longer just a place of quiet. It is filled with a low, constant, intellectual hum. The air, already rich with the scent of coffee and cake, becomes charged with the energy of thought. You are living in the Vormärz period, the years leading up to the great revolutions of 1848. It is a time of deep political conservatism in the Austrian Empire, an era where the state police and a network of spies watch for any hint of liberal or nationalist ideas. Free and open discussion is a dangerous activity, often confined to the most private of circles. Academics still debate the extent to which these informal intellectual circles, meeting in apartments and cafes, contributed to the revolutionary ideas that would soon sweep across Europe. But you can feel it right here in your tiny room. You are providing a safe harbor, a place where ideas can be explored without fear of a censor's pen or a policeman's knock on the door. Your family's role begins to shift. You are not merely proprietors. You are the silent guardians of this nascent intellectual sanctuary. Your father's coffee is the fuel that keeps the conversations going long into the afternoon. Your mother's simple, honest cake is the comfort that makes the space feel like a home, not an institution. You learn the students' names. You know that Carl, the poet, prefers his coffee with a little extra sugar. You know that Johanna, the architect, will need a fresh napkin for her sketches. You learn to move quietly among them, refilling a cup, clearing a plate, never interrupting the delicate web of their discussions. One afternoon, the professor leaves behind his copy of a dense philosophical journal. A few minutes later, Carl, the poet, picks it up and begins to read. This small act sparks a new tradition. In the grand Viennese cafes, a vast selection of local and international newspapers are offered to patrons, held in elegant wooden frames called Zeitungsstock. Your family could never afford such a luxury. But now you have something better. Your customers create their own library. The professor starts leaving books and academic papers on the counter. The students bring their own, passing them from hand to hand. A small, informal exchange is born. The corner of your counter becomes a repository of poetry, philosophy, and radical new ideas about art and society. You find yourself listening, truly listening as you work. You learn about the Romantic poets, about the new architectural styles sweeping through Germany, about the debates over constitutional governance. You, the clerk's daughter, are receiving an education that no formal school could offer. You are a quiet, aproned student in the most exclusive, accidental university in all of Vienna. One evening, after the last student has departed and the professor has made his customary gruff exit, you stand with your father looking around the small room. The air is still warm and smells of coffee, but it also seems to vibrate with the ghosts of the day's conversations. Three empty cups sit on the counter, and beside them lies a well-worn copy of Schiller's plays, left for someone else to find tomorrow. He called my coffee adequate, your father says, a small, proud smile playing on his lips as he wipes down the counter. He is no longer a man defeated by numbers. His work has a purpose you can feel. You look around the small, white-walled room, at the three simple stools, at the books waiting for their next reader. You realize with a sudden clarity that you haven't just created a place that sells coffee and cake. You've created a space where people feel safe enough to share their ideas, their dreams, their arguments. It's more than a business, it's a community. It is the city's warmest and most thoughtful secret. The rhythm of your days settles into a new, comforting pattern. The heart of this rhythm is the grumpy professor and his circle of thinkers. They are the scaffolding around which your family's new life is built. The three stools in your tiny coffee house effectively become a reserved table, a Stammtisch for these original patrons. Other customers, when they begin to appear, seem to understand this instinctively, respecting the invisible boundary around the core group. It's one of the first of many unspoken rules that will come to define your establishment. The fame of your café does not spread like a wildfire, but like the slow, steady blooming of a flower in a hidden garden. It happens organically, through quiet, heartfelt recommendations. Johanna, the young architect, brings her mentor, a master builder with hands like shovels and a surprisingly gentle voice. He is captivated not by the design, but by the honesty of the place, by the simple sturdiness of the stools your father built. He starts coming by himself on Friday afternoons just to sit and enjoy the quiet. Carl, the poet, brings a friend who works for a literary journal. The friend is so charmed by the atmosphere that he writes a small, anonymous piece about a thimble of a cafe hidden in the city's heart, a place where the coffee is strong and the thoughts are free. The piece doesn't mention your name or the alley's location, but it captures the spirit of the place perfectly, and it's enough. People are intrigued, the burgeoning Viennese middle-class merchants, musicians, civil servants, are a curious and literate group, always on the lookout for authentic experiences away from the rigid formality of the court. They begin to seek you out. A trickle of new faces becomes a slow but steady stream. They are not the loud, boisterous crowds of the grand cafes. They are people who, like the professor, are seeking something specific. A cellist from the city orchestra comes for a cup of coffee before every performance. Claiming the quiet helps him center his mind. Two elderly sisters, dressed in matching lavender shawls, make a weekly pilgrimage for a slice of your mother's Gugelhupf, which they declare is the only one that tastes like their own. Mother used to make. A master chess player discovers your cafe and finds a worthy opponent in one of the professor's mathematics students. Their silent, intense games in the corner become a new feature of the cafe's quiet theater. You watch as the cafe becomes what sociologists and urban planners still debate the role of a third place, a vital hub of community that is neither the home nor the workplace. It is a space where connections are forged, where loneliness is eased, and where a sense of belonging is nurtured, all over a simple cup of coffee. Your family are not just the owners. You are the hosts, the caretakers of this precious environment. Your father, Papa Franz, is a transformed man. The worried, hunched clerk has vanished. In his place is a confident craftsman, a respected figure known for his exceptional coffee. He talks with the master builder about the properties of wood, with the poet about the rhythm of language, with the professor about the price of beans from Trieste. He is engaged with the world in a way he never was before. The deep worry lines on your mother's face have all but disappeared, replaced by the quiet pride she feels every time someone's eyes close in bliss after the first bite of her cake. She adds a second offering, a simple butter biscuit with a dot of jam in the center, and it too becomes a beloved staple. And you, Lena, are the calm center of this gentle storm. You greet everyone with a quiet smile. You know their names, their stories, their joule orders. You move through the tiny space with a practiced, graceful ease, orchestrating the flow of conversation and coffee, ensuring the atmosphere of warm, respectful quiet is maintained. You are the welcoming face of the city's warmest secret. One snowy afternoon in the heart of winter, you have a moment of pure, crystalline clarity. A thick blanket of white has muffled the entire city, making your hidden alley feel even more like a secret world. Inside, the air is warm and steamy, the small pane of glass in the door fogged over. The room is full. Every stool is taken. The chess game is in full swing. Johanna is showing her mentor a new drawing. A young couple, new visitors, are sharing a piece of cake, their heads close together, whispering. The low, gentle hum of conversation is a comforting, living sound. Your father is at the stove, pouring a fresh cup of coffee, and as he turns, he catches your eye across the small, crowded room. he smiles. It is a smile of such pure, unadulterated joy, of such profound, weary gratitude that it makes your heart swell. In that shared, silent glance, you both acknowledge the miracle you have built together from nothing but dust, desperation, and a dream. You took the greatest wager of your lives, and you have won. The image of that warm, crowded room begins to soften now, its edges blurring into a gentle, golden haze. The specific faces, the quiet conversations, the rich, deep aroma of coffee and almond cake, they all start to fade, leaving behind only the pure, comforting feeling of the place, a feeling of warmth in the cold, of safety in the storm, a feeling of community, of shared humanity in a small, simple room. Let the story of the Keller family and their tiny coffee house dissolve into the quiet of your own room. Let the gentle hum of their success become the gentle hum of your own slow, steady breathing. There is no need to think about the details anymore, only to float on the feeling of deep, quiet satisfaction. The feeling that even the smallest, most forgotten spaces can be filled with light and warmth, and that even the most desperate wager can sometimes lead to the most beautiful, unexpected home. Allow this feeling of cozy contentment to be your guide now as you drift away from the snowy Viennese streets, deeper and deeper into the welcoming quiet of your own soft, warm bed, easing now so peacefully into a truly sweet and well-deserved dream.